There we go. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse Hildebrand, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those who don't know, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Right now, we're joined by 4 classrooms from across North America. I'm going to give them a chance to do a bit of a shout-out before we introduce our speaker. So first, we've got Mrs. Schaefer's grade 6s from Kitchener, Ontario. Setting the bar very high with enthusiasm. We've got Mr. Lovett's grade 7s from San Antonio, Texas.
Thank you.
Where are you guys? Oh, there we go.
Hello.
Hi. Am I getting wrong where you guys are from?
He said Mr. Lovett.
He said Mr. Lovett.
What did I say? Who are you then? You're not. We'll figure out who you are in a minute. All right, we've got Mr. Culls, grade 5s from Cobalt, Ontario. Hi. We had a class drop out, but we had our 5th class join in, so we've got Mrs. Grade 4s, Miss Reeves from Leamington, Ontario as well.
Hi.
Awesome, guys. All right. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. We're joined by Olie Hunter Smart, live from India at 8 p.m., yeah. And previously he joined us kayaking the entire Amazon River. And while most of us, you know, we walk to the fridge or we walk to school if we're ambitious, Olie wanted to walk all of India. And so we've covered 3 other hangouts with him so far. Now he's done his journey. He did it. He made it from north to south, all the way across the subcontinent. And so without further ado, to tell us more about his journey, thank you so much for joining us today, Olie.
Thank you very much, guys, and thanks for joining again. It's great to finally have the opportunity to speak to you again and share the last bit of my journey. Yeah, thanks for joining in, particularly the ones that have followed throughout the whole journey. It's great to have you back. So I think we last spoke in October. And a lot has happened since then. I've walked over 1,000 kilometers, and I'm just going to dive in to screen share. Hopefully this is going to work. It's
not yet, but we'll get there. I'll let you know when it does.
There we go. Okay, the share screen's come up. And I think you can see it.
Almost. You've frozen. We'll see if it pops up again in a second. This is the fun of 12-hour difference hangouts.
Yeah, exactly. The poor Wi-Fi in India.
Okay. Oh, there we go. We got it. Perfect.
Woohoo! That's perfect. Okay, so I don't know if you can see my mouse, but when you guys joined me last time, I was down here, so I still had a fair bit to go, and since then I've walked 1,000 kilometers. I've walked 1,000 kilometers, and I had to do a little bit of a detour down the bottom here because I'd walked into an area where there was a huge amount of forest, and so I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but I had to do a detour in order to kind of get out of the mountains, through the forest, and then southern tip of India, right down the bottom, a place called Kanyakumari. Last time we talked about a little bit about where I'd been staying, and I'd been staying with some families, and I'd been staying with, I'd stayed in a temple. More recently, I've stayed in a restaurant. Now, the reason I did that is because I walked into this village and there was nowhere for me to stay. They didn't have a temple that was big enough or had any kind of space for me to put my tent up. And the whole area was still very much covered in agricultural land and communities. So there wasn't anywhere for me to stay. So I spoke to this restaurant owner and said, "Is there anywhere I can stay tonight?" And he said, "Yeah, just put your tent up in the kitchen. We'll move the tables about," and that was it. So that was quite a fun evening. More about my routine, really. I've been spending a fair bit of time in hostels or in people's houses. And I think I probably spent a third of my time staying with families in their houses or in temples or in schools or government buildings. So that's how generous people have been. And then some of the times I do stay in lodges or hotels. Just one example. So when I do that, a lot of my time is, a lot of my evening is taken up with admin, because I have to wash my clothes, and I wash my clothes every single day. So that's just a little bit more about my routine. And then I try and dry them overnight as best I can. So here I managed to find a little washing line that I could then string up all my clothes and let them dry overnight while I slept. The other thing, I know I talked briefly last time about my bag, Zoe, who had given me a few challenges, shall we say. The bag kept on breaking, the straps were kind of wearing away, so it was tied together a lot with string. The other thing that has been causing me a few more problems recently is my boots. And actually I've got my boots, so I'll show you those, but you can see on the bottom of the boots, they were, and they'd worn right down to the very bottom, the last point they could. So I actually had to go to a cobbler, a shoe repairer, and he managed to cut me some new bits of rubber that he could put on the bottom. So we glued those on and we nailed them on, and I had to get them replaced about 3 or 4 times, just because I was wearing through the material they were putting on so quickly. I'm going to just jump out here and come back to my camera. Hopefully you can see. But more recently, you can see there that leather has actually ripped a couple of months just because of the monsoon rain. It's really worn down the leather. They were getting so wet, and I've actually had to take them to another cobbler and just have the stitching, and again along the bottom there, to keep the sole attached to the upper part of the shoe. So these guys are so relieved that we've finally finished the walk, and I just need them in order to get back to the UK, and then I can hang these up and maybe just use them for showing off and for some of the talks that I do. So I'm going to jump back to my screen. There we go. That should be good. So a lot of the areas I've been passing recently have been agricultural areas, and it's not just food that is produced. I've been passing huge fields of sugarcane and coconut trees, but this crop here, which these women are now sorting out, is called betel nut, and it's something that they chew. They mix it with a leaf. They wrap a bit of the nut, once they've dried it out, they wrap a bit of the nut in these leaves, and sometimes they add a bit of tobacco, and then they chew that. And it's incredibly popular all over India. But this is very much the region, because of the tropical climate, this is very much the region that the betel nut palms are grown. So all of these women are laborers, and you can see just in the foreground here, one of the women has actually brought her child to work with her, because the child's not old enough to go to school, but she needs some childcare. So there were a couple of children that were running around just playing about and so on, while these women were working. They were earning about 600 rupees a day, which is about, I guess, it's probably about $10 a day. So that's quite a good wage out in India. So that gives you a bit of an idea. Another thing that they're huge on down here is bananas. And I happened to pass this market where all the bananas from the farmers nearby get brought to this area, and they're then bought in these people here are all buying huge amounts of bananas, and they'll then take them to the various villages and sell them off out their communities. So they buy 1 ton of bananas at a time, and a ton of bananas would cost about 40,000 rupees, which I guess is about, I think it's about £80, $80, roughly, something like that. So it's, you know, they're incredibly cheap bananas out here, and I'd eat bananas every single day as part of my breakfast. Give me a lot of energy, and it was good, a good fruit to be eating. So I'd eat 2 bananas at breakfast time a day, along with some peanut butter and quite often bread as well. So last time I talked a little bit about religion, and some of the temples, or the look and feel of the temples has changed significantly. And here's one of the really elaborate temples that you can see, particularly noticeable in the south part of India. Further north, they're less elaborate, but here they're so elaborately carved. All the different gods are in each one of these little turret areas, and then there are statues going all the way up to that main tower. So they're incredible to see. And the second reason I've added this photo in is because a friend of mine came out to join me. As you know, I've been trying to make a documentary of my journey through India. My friend here, he came out to film me for 4 days. So we had a great time just running around, walking through fields, and there's a couple of clips on YouTube as well of some of the stuff that he shot with me. So we had a fantastic time, and it was nice to have a friend join me for a bit and just you know, have something else to talk about, really. So I've been passing through some of the bigger cities as well, and this in these large cities, India was originally separated into I guess smaller states, much more smaller states than they are now. And each state was run by a Maharaja, and he had an incredible palace, and a lot of people working for him, and a lot of the communities. He would look after the communities, and they would equally look after him, make sure he was in power. So you can now, a lot of these Maharajas sort of handed over power to the British once the British were here, but the palaces have very much still remained their home. So you can now visit these incredible palaces. And this is just one of those palaces. You can see the beautiful arches, the very gold ceilings that he used. And this, because of the way they're designed, the air flows really freely through them, which keeps them cool in the heat of the day. And so they're really nice places just to go and walk around, and you can see sort of big paintings and just relax, really. And this is some of the areas I've been walking through, particularly as I come into large cities. They become very industrial. And I happened to walk one day past India's largest tire. So it was a huge tire factory, and out of the front of the factory, they had this gigantic tire. And you can see from the size of it compared to me, it's well over 6 feet tall. So it's probably about 2.5 meters tall, that tire. It was a lot of fun just walking past and seeing these quirky things. Another thing you'll notice here is I'm actually wearing my glasses. And in India, after they've harvested the sugarcane, which happens in about October and early November, they burn the fields to get rid of the stubble, nutrients back into the ground before they then replant for the next season. And what I found is that the smoke from the slash and burn, as they call it, was really starting to affect my eyes, and my eyes felt like they had razor blades in them. And they were just streaming water the whole time, and I couldn't really see. So I ended up having to wear my glasses for a couple of days, which I don't enjoy, but it was the only way that I was going to be able to see. And then slowly but surely, I approached Kanyakumari. The first sign I saw was 265 kilometers away from Kanyakumari, so I had my little celebration. But unfortunately, the road pretty much from this sign became incredibly busy, there really is only one road that leads down to Kanyakumari. So I ended up walking along the edge of this road for a number of days, and it just got really monotonous, and I tried to find smaller routes through agricultural land and through small villages and things that I could. But actually, in the end, the main road that I had to walk on was this busy road full of trucks and lorries and buses and so on. And again, here's another shot of walking through a town where it's just so much traffic and just impossible to walk through, really. And as the further south I got, you can still see the Western Ghats, which is the mountain range that lie. They kind of actually start up near Delhi, and they do come all the way down the west coast of India, west side of India. So a lot of the places I've been walking through have had mountains visible, which I really enjoyed. I think last time I mentioned the fact that I hadn't really seen any hills for a long time, and it was starting to affect me, affect my happiness throughout the journey. I like texture in my landscape, and I like to be able to see something in the horizon, and that was something I was really struggling with. So I was walking through through some of these hills, and this is where I had to walk through a tiger reserve. Now, it's not something I'd really planned, but as I said, when I got to a city called Mysore, I realized that I'd managed to walk myself into a bit of a semicircle of forests. And the only way out of that was to walk through a national park or through a tiger reserve, or else I'd have to walk north again and then across to one of the coasts, whether it was towards Bangalore and then down the east coast, or whether I'd head out towards the west coast and head down through Kerala. Now, I didn't really have time to do that. I was on a bit of a deadline, so I decided that I was going to walk through the forest. Now, the forest is full of tigers and elephants and leopards, and so I didn't really feel very safe about that. I phoned up one of the national parks and asked them if I could walk through, or whether they would be able to provide me a ranger that could walk through with me or provide some sort of protection. And they said, there's no way you can walk through this. So I decided that I was going to just hire a taxi. And I hired a taxi, and he shadowed me for a day, which gave me some sense of security and relief, really. But it did allow me to walk through the forest. Now, unfortunately, I didn't see any tigers or elephants or leopards, but the only animals we really did see were monkeys and some deer in the distance. But it was a really beautiful area to be walking through, and I was incredibly privileged to have had that opportunity. I did come across a few rangers as I was walking, and they kind of asked me what I was doing, and I explained, and my taxi driver behind me also helped explain to them what I was doing. So they did let me pass, which is good, and it allowed me to keep my journey going. And then finally, I reached Kanyakumari. Now, this is the temple that I was aiming for. This temple is at the southernmost tip of India. Further out to sea, all you can see, basically the direction I'm pointing is the Indian Ocean. On the side, you've got the Bay of Bengal, and on the right hand side, you've got the Arabian Sea. So this is the point where three oceans meet. And this is the southernmost tip of India. Temple, which is dedicated to Mahatma Gandhi, because when he died, his ashes, some of his ashes were brought down to this temple, and they were they were put on a plinth to allow people to come and pay their respects to his ashes. And then about a week later, they were then cast off into the ocean that you can see, and they would then scatter around the ocean. And the idea is that Mahatma Gandhi is the father of the nation, and his ashes were scattered all around the edge of the nation. So I was incredibly happy to finally reach here just last Wednesday. So just over a week I've had to relax. So since then, I did go for a little swim at the end there as well. There's a tiny little beach just behind these rocks here. So I went for a swim there and really, really, really enjoyed that. Although I did lose my GoPro, which is incredibly annoying to lose it on the final day of the expedition. So let me just, I think, yeah, I've come back. So my journey really, I've now come north to Kerala, which is on the west coast of India, and I've spent a week volunteering in a school, a kindergarten school. So I've been helping out with sort of 3- and 4-year-old children, really trying to teach them a bit of English. And then in the afternoons, I've been helping out in an orphanage as well. And the orphanage has a really unique concept because they've got 6 homes for the children. Each home has maximum 10 children in, and a mother that looks after those children. So the idea is that these kids have lost their families. They've lost their sense of kind of a home. So what this orphanage is trying to do is they're really trying to provide that community, that family, and that home for the children as they grow up. And they're really smiley, happy kids. And one thing I've noticed over the last couple of weeks just being there is their English has dramatically improved. To me in English every day, I'm speaking to them, which is fantastic to see. Even though we're just playing with them, playing football or playing in the playground with some of the younger kids, their quality of English has really improved, and it was quite touching today. Today was the last day, and my girlfriend's been working there as well. She's built up more of a relationship with them, but one of the 3-year-old kids or 3.5-year-old kids actually came up and said goodbye and thank you, and she said that in English, and I was just so kind of overwhelmed by that. It was really, really touching. So yeah. So from here we're going to head north, and we've got a bit of time to travel through India before heading back to the UK. So I'll be back in the UK in February, start of February, which is when I'm going to start putting my documentary together and release it in August next year. So I'm going to try and speak to Joe and see if we can show it somehow with the Explore by the Sea to Feel Pants community.
Excellent. We look very forward to doing that. That'll be a given.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've talked enough, and I think it's definitely time to move on for some questions.
All right. I love how after walking India, your plan is to spend a month exploring India. Like that. You must really like it.
Yeah. No, it's there are some other places that people have told me because I was on such a, I couldn't go and visit somewhere that was 50 kilometers away because that would take me 3/4 of a day to walk there. So there are some other places in India that I wanted to go to and visit. I haven't been to see the Taj Mahal. It wasn't on my route, and I couldn't really work it into my route. So I thought I'm going to go and see the Taj Mahal. It's the most iconic building in India, or certainly one of the top 2. So yeah, I've got a few places I want to go, and Katie, my girlfriend as well, is keen to see some of India, having spent 2 weeks with the kids in the orphanage and the school.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to hearing about that aspect of your journey too. But as you said, let's go to questions, and we'll start with Mrs. Schaefer's class. If you guys have a question, come on up. Yep, you're good.
Hi. Hi, I'm Savannah. My question is, what's one word you would describe your journey?
One word to describe my journey. I'm going to go with the word, phenomenal. And that, the word phenomenal. And that is in kind of, there's a couple of things that have really stood out about India. And I could use a number of words to describe it. Mixed would be another, actually. It's an incredible country. It's so diverse. There's a big mix of different religions and castes. Now, the caste system is a bit like the class system, whereby there are different hierarchies of people. Some people have kind of really good jobs and a good income, and then some people are much poorer. It's also incredibly intense, which is another way to describe India. You don't get much time to yourself because people are always interested in who you are, where you're from, what you're doing in that region, you know, why you're walking through their village. But at the same time, the landscape has been unbelievably beautiful. The people have been incredibly generous. So I think phenomenal just does sum up the whole journey through India.
Excellent. Great answer. All right, let's go to the mystery grade 7 class in San Antonio. If you guys have a question, come on up. Go right ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Richard.
No, that's
Yeah, Miss Mourinho, we'll get back to you guys in just a minute, okay?
Yes, sir.
Stay right here.
All right, go ahead, guys. Yep.
Oh. Is it on the mic? What made you go explore India?
Yep, you can ask. Go ahead.
What made you go and explore India?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I don't. Oh, hey, let's try again. Let's. Sorry, got something wrong here. There we go. Try again. Perfect. Sorry.
What made you go and explore India?
The inspiration for coming to India and walking the length of India was Mahatma Gandhi. I don't know how much you know about him, but he was like the 1860s, I think. He was an incredible guy. Actually, it would have been late 1880s. Well over 100. But he was an incredible guy, and he undertook the Salt March, which was a protest against the British salt tax. He was very much against the British ruling in India. He felt like India should be ruling their own country. He set up this Salt March, and he had about 80 people join him. Now, I followed the Salt March. It was in about, when was it? August, I think. I walked along the Salt March route, and it was amazing to kind of be following in Gandhi's footsteps. But when I was doing the research about the Salt March, I realized there was a lot more history that I didn't know about, particularly around the British ruling in India. But the places that had a big impact in particularly the independence movement, which followed the Salt March. Gandhi's Salt March united the country behind the freedom fight, the struggle for freedom. And so that was really what inspired me to come to India. But I've wanted to come to India for so long. I just hadn't found a real reason to do it until I started reading about Indian history. And I thought, now's the time to go. And this year, 2017, was the 70th anniversary of independence from Britain. So I thought, I want to come and see the celebrations and meet people that experienced that period of history. Because the people that would remember, they would have been maybe 10 at the time, so there'll be 80 now. So there are not many of those people left, and I realized if I waited any longer, there'd be even fewer. So I decided this year was the year I had to do it, and I've met so many incredible people. I've met a lot of 85 or 90-year-old people that have shared their stories with me, and it's been amazing to hear them. And that's one thing that I guess the core part of my documentary is going to be some of those stories.
Excellent. Well, we will look forward to that in August. All right, Mr. Cole's class, if you guys have a question,
Good,
come
no?
on up.
Just say it, no? I look.
What are you doing for Christmas?
What are we doing for Christmas? Well, we're still going to be in India, and the south part of India, there are a lot of Christians. So they celebrate Christmas, and in fact, we've seen some Christmas trees in some of the houses, and the school has a Christmas tree. The kindergarten school has a Christmas tree. But we're actually going to be further north, which is a much more Hindu area. But we decided we're going to be on a safari, one of the national parks, and hopefully we're going to find some tigers, maybe some elephants, and some other sort of wild animals. So we're going to spend 4 days over Christmas. With my parents are coming out. In fact, they landed today in India. They're up in Delhi. So yeah, we're gonna be on a safari over Christmas, which I cannot wait for, because I've been wanting to see a tiger for so long, having been in India, but just not had the opportunity to. And I didn't see one in that national park that I walked through.
So while the rest of us are looking for reindeer on a white Christmas, you'll be looking for tigers on a green Christmas.
Absolutely. And there won't be any turkey either.
All right, let's go to Mrs. Reeves' class. If you guys have a question, go for it.
Yes, we do.
If you could go back to one part of India, what part of India would you go to and why?
That's a great question. My favorite part of India, I think there are two areas which are both in northern India. The first is Ladakh, which was where I started my journey. And up in that region, the mountains were incredible. I don't know if you guys joined the hangout that I did in Shimla. I had a few photos and stories from that area. And the scenery was just beautiful. It was quiet. We had a lot of snow, and just walking up and down these mountains was really nice. Visit that area again. If I was to live in India, I think I would live in Himachal Pradesh, which is the area where we did the hangout, and the monkey joined us. You remember? So that was Shimla, and so it's, I guess, the southern part of the Himalayas. It's slightly lower. The climate's much more like the British climate, or I guess parts of USA and Canada. So I kind of feel like I could live there. Again, you've got beautiful mountains. You've got a lot more forest in those areas, and I think I'd feel at home there.
Excellent. Also, can I say before we go to the 5th class that I've never seen a class with a microphone? That is super prepared. Way to go, guys. All right, let's go to Mrs. Moreno's class. You'll just have to demute your own mic. The computer doesn't let me do it when there's this many classes. So, and there you go. Perfect.
Okay, yeah.
Did you ever?
Stand closer. You have to get closer to the camera.
Yeah, I see you.
Okay, stand up, baby. Okay, real loud.
Did you ever encounter danger or terrorism in India?
Did I ever encounter danger or terrorism? From danger from animals, no. I felt safe the whole time. I saw a few snakes, which were poisonous snakes, cobras, but people were always around, and they warned me about some of those dangers. Likewise with the tigers and the leopards and elephants, people were warning me that there was a section where I would or could encounter them, and I had to be incredibly careful, which is why I hired a taxi to shadow me, to drive behind me for a day. In terms of kind of terrorism or anything like that, no, I didn't. I think it would have been a lot of the terrorism problems are in the Kashmir region, so right next to Pakistan. The border between India and Pakistan is quite a hostile area, and there's a lot of terrorism in that region. But I didn't come through that area. The only danger that I felt I was in at one point, and it was, I wouldn't say incredibly dangerous, because I knew that the situation escalate into anything else. But I walked through an area where I walked between two military bases, and I didn't realize that there was a second military base that I was walking next to. I knew about the first one, and I'd asked a local person in the village if I could walk through that region, through that road, and he said, yeah, fine. And there were some shops that I passed, so I figured it was okay, it was going to be safe. And then this guy pops up from behind a wall, and he points a gun at me. I froze, and I put my camera down, I took my bag off, I put my hands in the air, and I tried to explain what I was doing. And they didn't really believe me to start with. And part of that was the language barrier. I didn't speak Gujarati, and they didn't speak English. And so there was kind of this confrontation for about half an hour before they found someone that could speak good enough English that I could explain what I was doing. And you know, I showed them my website, and I showed them my passport and my visa, and the guns went away, thankfully. And they were just interested in what I was doing and why I was walking between these two military bases. But ultimately, after about 2.5 hours, they let me go. I then they dropped me off at a hotel that night, because it was 10 o'clock by the time they let me go. So backwards, the next day, I caught a taxi back to outside the military base, and then started my journey again the following day. But that was the only danger, really. I mean, all of the people have been incredibly friendly other than that. You know, and I think they were just a little bit suspicious about why a tourist was walking next to their military base with this huge bag on their back, and you know, in the dark, or just as it's starting to get dark, could look like a gun. And I think that's all they thought.
Well, we're all glad you made it, and we're really glad we drove you to the hotel, which is a hilarious coda to that story.
Yeah.
All right. Olie, do you have time for another round of questions with all the classes?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Excellent. All right, so let's go back to Mrs. Schaefer's class. And yeah, come on up, guys.
What was your best feeling and worst feeling throughout the journey?
The best feeling, there were two, actually. The first was reaching Dandi Beach, which was the end of the Salt March. And I put a video up on, there's a video on Facebook, and you can see that my eyes are starting to well up. Because it was the inspiration for my journey, and I'd come all the way up from 5,500 meters, with some of the highest mountains that I was climbing over. And I'd come all the way down to sea level at Dandi. Dandi's the beach. And it was an incredibly emotional moment for me. And I'd really been forward to the Salt March. And then all of a sudden it was over. You know, I covered that part of the journey in 2 weeks. So that was an incredibly emotional part of the journey. But I look like it was happy tears. It was happy tears. And then the second would be reaching Kanyakumari. You know, I'd been walking for 7.5 months. I've covered 4,500 kilometers. And all of a sudden, I was just, the last day didn't feel real. I set off early. I set off at about 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. Make sure I reached Kanyakumari in good time. I wanted to get there in good light. And as I was walking along that final road, there were loads of hotels and restaurants along. It's a big touristy area because it's the southern tip of India. So I was walking along that road, and it didn't really feel real, but I was kind of bouncing along it because I was so excited to kind of see the sea finally. And I could see it in the distance, and then I got closer to the temple, and I could see the temple, and it was such a fantastic moment to know that there was nothing that was going to stop me from completing the journey. So again, I was incredibly happy. I was less teary that time.
Outstanding. All right. Great answers, by the way, Olie, to all these questions. Really detailed, which we really appreciate. Let's go back
Yeah.
Let's go back to the first class in San Antonio. This time I have your mic set properly, so I promise we'll actually hear you.
Okay.
What languages did you have to communicate during the journey?
Well, India there's about 1,000 languages in India.
Oh, we've lost him for a second. So, Olie, if you can still hear me, you froze. I don't know. See, now we're left hanging because we have no idea if he learned all 1,000 of those languages. But hopefully he pops back in a second. Well, worst case scenario, Olie, if you can still hear me, and I'll send him an email, guys, in a second too. You can sign out and sign back in again. That usually makes things work. This is the difficulty of having a connection from, half a world away. So let me send him a quick message, see if he can pop back in. I'll be right back. One thing we can do too, worst case scenario, guys, is I know that the other classes will have had questions. If you have other questions and if Olie doesn't come back in for whatever reason, send them to me and I'll pass them along to Olie. Hopefully he comes back in a minute. We'll give him 2 and find out how many languages he had to learn or got to speak or got to interact with. Actually, while we're waiting too, for all of you, there's a little chat bar in the top left. And if any of you need to go in a few minutes and want to make sure you get a question in, just let me know. Olie's back. Hi, Olie.
I'm back. Yes. Slightly more successful than trying to rejoin last time. Yeah, in summary, Hindi is spoken in the north part of the country. And then as I came further south, it's more local languages. So the state language, so Tamil, Karnataka, Maharashtrian. There was no way I could learn all of these languages, and so I really relied on English for my whole journey. And amazingly, there's always someone that can speak a little bit of English. I've got through with that, and I learned some of the Hindi words for some of the food. But essentially, I would just say I just want some food, and whatever you're cooking, I'll eat. But yeah, I mean, the languages change. I said, there are over 1,000 languages in India. They change slightly every 50 or 100 kilometers. So sometimes it's just accent changes. Sometimes their words actually change meanings as well. So I just had to rely on English. And I've managed to do okay. A lot of the kids speak English. A lot of the kids speak English in school. India realizes that the English language is such an important language for global relations and business opportunities that it's a big part of the syllabus. And they have English medium schools here, which teach every single subject in English apart from their local state language.
Awesome.
Thanks,
All right.
Mr. Coles. We'll speak soon.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if he, Mr. Cole, if you guys have a quick second before you go, if you want to ask another question, you can.
Sure, Taylor, go ahead.
Cool.
Was the food good?
Yeah, the food in India is awesome. Again, the food changes with the language. So every 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, the food changes. And that's partly because of the way that most families in India have some farming land. And so growing there, a lot of the food that they will eat, they will grow themselves, whether it's corn or rice, different vegetables, ladies' fingers. I don't know what you guys call them in the States and Canada, but yeah, you get all of these different fruits and vegetables every 50 kilometers, and then in each area as well. So different level of spice. Some areas have much sweeter food, some much spicier food. But on the whole, in the north part of India, the food is quite oily. And then further south, there's a lot more coconut added to the food. So it's less oily and more less spicy as well. But I've loved India, like the food throughout the whole of India. I'm not going to lie, there are times where I've gone off the food completely and I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't stomach Indian food. And very fortunately, there's a lot of places that cook Chinese food as well. So they do noodles or kind of Chinese rice, Chinese fried rice, egg fried rice, that sort of thing. So there were other options. And every now and again, I did pass a McDonald's and I would nip inside for a little chicken burger or something.
I love how both with journeys, anytime we talk to anyone on any journey, rice is everywhere. Like you can't go anywhere in the world without having rice as an option. And McDonald's apparently, which is, is probably possibly good, possibly bad. We're not sure. We'll debate that later.
It's good.
Right.
But in McDonald's, they don't serve beef in McDonald's. It's only chicken. Beef in India. So you only get chicken burgers or veg burgers.
They have veggie burgers in McDonald's in India, but not here? Unbelievable.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll give them a call. Let's go back to Mrs. Reeves' class. If you guys have a second question, come on up.
Very small. And right. Hold that right to your mouth.
How many kilometers did you walk a day, and how many hours each day?
So every day I was walking between 25 and 35 kilometers. And the reason for that is I wanted to make sure I was kind of covering a good distance each day. I guess I would walk about 5 kilometers an hour. I would then take a short break, like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just to have some water, because I didn't drink. I didn't have one of those Camelbacks with a straw that came around. I actually had a water bottle. So I would stop every time and drink some water, have a bit of a rest, take my bag off. My bag was 28 kilos most of the time, so it was quite nice to take the bag off every now and again. And then there were some days where I decided I wanted to reach a city in time for maybe a particular festival or celebration, or just to get there so that I knew I could then have a day off and not have to walk. So the longest day I did was 47 kilometers. Took me 11 hours. I started late because I was doing a talk in a school and I didn't leave until 11 a.m. So I then found myself walking until 11 p.m. my hotel, and I was so tired. Yeah, on average, it would be 25 to 35 kilometers, and I'd walk about 8 or 9 hours each day, and then have some time to rest at lunchtime, particularly in the middle of the day when it's incredibly hot.
Great question and great answer. For classes too, it's worth noting that that's an average of about 3/4 of a marathon every single day over the whole journey. So, Olie, better you than me, and good job. All right, let's do a last question.
Oh, there we go.
Back to Miss Marina's class.
Go ahead. Roland.
How are schools different in India from here?
From America.
From America. Well, that's a good question. I have no idea what an American school is like, but I can imagine it's fairly similar to an English school. And the classes here, the kids in the kindergarten, they start at age 3.5, and they go up until they start doing exams when they're about 5, and they kind of learn subjects like they'll learn English and maths and science and their local language as well. And it depends. Some schools are English medium, subjects are in English, and some schools only teach in the local language, and English is their additional subject. So you do get a difference between the two schools, the two types of schools. But they start school a bit later. They start school at 10 o'clock generally, and they'll go through until about 3:30. And they have a lunch break at school, but everyone takes their own lunch into school, and they'll eat it in their classroom. And then they get a bit of playtime as well at lunchtime to do, play outside and so on. But a lot of the schools don't let the children play outside because the sun is incredibly intense and it's very hot. So often the playground is actually covered with a roof. So it seems like they don't go outside and they don't play, but actually they do. They play kind of inside or under the roof, under the shelter. And they do, what do? They basically, they're in school until they're age 16, and then they decide whether they want to go and continue their education. So they will continue their education till 18, and then at age 18 they go to university. And what I found is a lot of people go to university to study 3 subjects. They study English, they study medicine, and they study business. Engineering as well. And the reason for that is because there's a big demand for people that understand medicine, so doctors and nurses. There's a big demand for mechanics to repair all the cars and the bikes. So every single village will have 3 or 4 people that can repair a bike, a motorbike. And what was the other one? Engineering.
Business.
Medicine. Oh, business, yeah. Everyone else then studies business. Thank you, Jesse. Everyone else then studies business. And there are a lot of very small businesses in India, but it gives everyone training to start their own business, to be an entrepreneur. And then the opportunity for them is kind of, whatever they want to go and do. So everyone has kind of a basic business training as well.
Excellent. All right, so a lot of similarities, a lot of differences, and you'll have to come to American school someday to find out what they're like. We'll report back.
Oh, I'd love to do I'd love to do a tour of American and Canadian schools, and come and do some talks.
You could walk North America north to south. You can start out and go from there.
I've got a friend who's currently, he's already run across Canada, and his next challenge at the moment, he's on a book tour driving across Canada from east to west, and then he's going to head south, and he's then going to run west coast of America across to the east coast.
So you're saying is your friends are as lazy as you are?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Olie, it's come to the end of our hangout. So what we do at the end of every hangout is, so for everyone's mic, I'm going to demute Mrs. Schaefer's San Antonio classroom, Mrs. Reeb. If you could join me in saying a big thank you to Olie. So thank you, Olie.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's been amazing. Yeah, I love sharing all my journey and my stories with you guys, and I hope we can continue.
We hope so too. We look forward to your next adventure. Enjoy India, enjoy Tiger Christmas, and we're looking very forward to that documentary.
Yeah, excellent.